Hey everybody, this is Brad from Johnson Small Engines. We are working on a 9 horsepower Craftsman snow thrower, 26 inch, and I'm going to show you how I remove the carburetor on it. It has a 9 horsepower Tecumseh. I want to come around and show you the model number of the machine, just in case you have any questions on what model this is. It's a 536-886260, if I read that correctly. And then we're going to come over to my tools. Tools that we use from left to right is going to be, you're going to need a punch, or actually, I take the muffler off, so I use a chisel. I have to use this because it actually helps me hold the chisel, born with the one hand. Then we're going to have a Phillips head screwdriver. I use an impact driving socket that I have found on an impact driver. All right, the kit, you can buy these kits. In fact, I think I bought a kit at home at Harbor Freight. It has a fatter head on it, and the Phillips head screwdrivers, we can get small, medium, or large, doesn't matter, we can do them all, but the screws that we take off of the covers tend to strip, so this has really helped me put a lot more pressure on it. And what I did was I put a piece of paper towel in here and I pushed this in extremely hard so it doesn't fall out, and then I also can use it on a 1/4 inch ratchet. Now I use 1/4 inch ratchet, but I'm going to be using my electric impact here that I use because it just makes it easier for me to use it. We're going to be using 5/16 1/4 inch drive, 3/8 drive, 7/16 drive, and 1/2 inch drive, all 1/4 inch. You don't need anything above 1/4 inch for this. If you have 3/8 drive stuff, that's fine too. The Phillips head screwdriver, you have to push a lot of pressure on it, and I sometimes if I have to use this, I'll use a wrench. If you have the collar that you can put a wrench on, you can push in this real hard, and you can use the wrench to actually loosen it up or tighten it. And it helps, helps them from getting stripped. But you have to push a lot of pressure on the screws when you're taking them off. And this just helps me take them off. This is basically a screwdriver that I made it a point so I can scratch the carburetor. You'll see when we get to taking the carburetor off, as far as when you have to scratch the top of the carburetor base so you can see where you put the linkage back in again. 1/4 inch drive, this is a 1/4 inch drive nut driver. You can use 1/4 inch socket. Nut driver works for me. Couple different extensions. This is my plastic clip tool that takes plastic clips off, and it's great for taking fuel line off and other objects too. So I use this all the time. Pair of pliers, pair of needle nose vice grips, and not needle nose. This is a needle nose vice grip. This is needle nose pliers. These I use to pinch off the fuel line if needed, if you don't have a fuel shutoff underneath the fuel tank. And then the hammer, of course, we're using with the chisel. I take the muffler off. All right, so we're going to get over to the machine and we'll get started. So here's where we start getting the carburetor off. This is the shield we got to take off. Now, I personally take off the mufflers. It just makes it easier to get to the backside of the carburetors. And on this one here, we may have to take this off. I'm not sure if the cover will come out easy. We'll have to see. This knob's got to come off, and since everything's together, this is where I get my plastic tool clip remover off. And if you put it behind here and get it where the rod is and push it out nice and easy, it should just come off. All right, put that to the side. Just make sure you don't lose anything. All right, we have 2 screws here. Now these are the ones that sometimes can be tough and people strip them out. All right, that's where I come in with my longer. I have a special my special Phillips head socket that I use, and we'll go ahead and take these off. Now I'm just going to slowly turn them so I don't strip them before I use the electric ratchet part. But a Phillips head screwdriver may just work just fine. But I've just learned through the years of doing this that this helps me a lot more. Alright. Now I got to go to your 5/16 socket. And it looks like I have lost mine. Okay, found it. All right, 5/16, you got one up here, and you have one on the other side. We'll do this one first. We're just going to take these off. Now, while we're on this side, I want to show you underneath the carburetor, underneath this housing, there's a wire here. This is actually a ground wire that connects to this cover. This ground wire is actually just slid on right here at this connector, and a lot of times you can just pull it right off. So you pull that off before this cover will drop, and then it gets yanked, and sometimes these will break, so you gotta be careful. So this is the one part that's actually attached here, and I'll show you that to you in a minute. Now we have one more piece on the other side we gotta go around to. So So this guy here is the other piece that's actually holding this cover on, 5/16. Or you can use a Phillips head screw on that one. It has a slotted for it, but I used to use a nut driver. Okay, so this is now loose. And we're going to attempt to get this off. This is what hangs us up sometimes. But you have to come out over this shaft. And you got to slide it around. Now, sometimes that can be... Now, it did come off. Now, here's the wire. Now, if you had the wire disconnected, this is where it goes to. This is your on and off switch. Basically, this is just... You got to make sure you have a key in. A lot of people try to start their machines up and the key's not in. As soon as the key's out, it will shut it off. The key's got to be in there. It's just a ground. Basically, it goes down to here, which grounds it. All right, so just make sure you unplug that before you pull it off. And now we have the carburetor right here, which we're going to take off and rebuild. All right, so next thing you want to do, what I do is I take the muffler off, and it's 2 half-inch bolts, and you can use a half-inch, or they're not half-inch bolts. It's actually a half-inch socket that you take these bolts off. Bolts are probably 5/16. But what my problem is getting these tabs have to be pushed out. So you can take those bolts. That's like an anti-vibration thing. The mufflers get extremely hot. So I use my chisel and I put it into this handy tool that actually holds it. And then being that I'm one-handed, I try to just use my arm the best I can to move those tabs away with a chisel and a hammer. Doesn't take a whole lot. You get this one out of the way just so you can get a socket on there. And there's one on the bottom. Oh, all right, I think that should be good enough. Now that's a half-inch socket, which I have here somewhere. Yeah, all right, now that fits. And now we do have a bolt on top. You have to remember to take this one off too. That's a 3/8. I'm going to take the 3/8 off first. And then go to your half-inch socket. Normally these mufflers do not have gaskets. All right, and just make sure you don't lose everything. Put it back. They do not have gaskets on there. A lot of them don't, and that's fine. It doesn't. You're not using these things all that much, and they're loud anyway. Okay, now the reason why I had that scratchy tool with a point on it, I have to go get that real quick, is that I want to mark where I take off my governor linkage to my carburetor. If you can see right here, it has 1, 2, 3 holes. All right, well, we want to mark it, and I usually try to put a nice deep scratch in there, and I usually do a better scratch when I get it out on the bench, because you want to get it back in the same hole. I've had people put these back in the wrong holes. They don't run right, and they wonder why. And after doing all this work, I'm going to make sure it's in the right. So put a little scratch on there, and when we take this off, you'll see on the bench that we just put a little better scratch on there. Now, this accesses the carburetor a little bit better for me. The fuel line is on this side. Now this has it has a clamp that you just have to push away with a pair of pliers. Now first thing we want to do is make sure we have the fuel shut off. This one does not have a fuel shut off, okay, underneath the fuel tank. So that's where your pair of vice grips come in handy. Or they do make fuel shut off tools that just screw on there. Vice grips have been using them for years and it's fine. Just don't over squeeze them. Alright, just need a little bit tighter than that. And that just blocks off. Now, you got to be careful. You don't want to compress too hard. You can ruin it. But this fuel line is in really good shape. It's not dry rotted or anything. If it is dry rotted, you want to replace that fuel line. We're good. Getting this hose clamp off sometimes right here can be a little tricky. So you basically just push them together and you move them off to the side like that. Now, there's not a lot of room in here, but we want to take our plastic clip tool, and it has the V in there, and it really works well to get between the fuel line and the carburetor and the little barb that the fuel line goes on. And if you keep just wiggling it away from the carburetor, eventually it pushes away, and you do have to push down in there. It can be a little tricky, but just push it away and push it off. Now you're going to have some fuel that's going to leak down onto the ground wherever you are. Just make sure if you're on asphalt that you're covered, because it's going to drip, and probably fuel does put a hole in asphalt if you're not careful. All right, so that's down out of the way. So that's one down. Now we have primer line here too. And primer line's right here. Primer line is going to be connected to the side of the carburetor, and I'm going to use my same tool to push it off. So that's disconnected there. This is a non-adjustable carburetor. There's no adjustment. This is actually the main jet under here. All right, so that is the this is a kit. I'll have to see if I can find the part number for this kit, but this is non-adjustable. It used to be adjustable there. Now this one here, also behind this cap, there is a jet behind that cap, and you have to take that cap off, and I'll show you on another video on how to disassemble this, but basically this is just a video on taking a carburetor off. Now when I take these carburetors off, I'd like to take off the bigger pieces because I put this in the ultrasonic cleaner, and that's where the 1/4-inch nut driver comes in handy to take this bracket off. You just have to remember where you had it, and with this video you'll be able to remember. And then I also take off this bracket here. It just makes it easier to rebuild them. And so that bracket there, that bracket can be a little tricky to get the Phillips head screws out. They put Loctite on these sometimes, so I use this big-headed Phillips, and I use that to start them, get them off, and you're just gonna get lined up. Yeah, that was a little tight. Okay, now I'm gonna loosen up the other. I'm gonna try doing them at the same time here. Let's see, I don't want to strip it. Okay. I'm pushing really hard on this thing, and now it's coming. Now that was a little tight too, but just got to make sure you don't round them. If you round them, you may not get them out, and then you have to go to drilling and all that, and it's a little tough. Make sure you don't lose any of your nuts and bolts and screws. Put them somewhere into a dish, somewhere that you're not going to lose them. And then this guy will just come right out like that. I'll put that aside. And then these guys here, it's a 1/4-inch nut driver, which I had somewhere floating around. So they're 1/4-inch heads on them. Not sure why I use a nut driver when I can just use my electric tool. Just a habit I've gotten into through all the years. These will come right out. And then we have to get the bolts on the back side of this carburetor, which are actually big Phillips heads again. And just remember not to lose your parts. Okay, so back to getting the carburetor off. We already scratched that, so we know where this goes. All right, we have these 2 bolts left, and the reason why the muffler's off is because I can get to the one in the back real easy. All right, so we're going to do the front one here. It's a Phillips head. I'm using an extremely large Phillips head tool there. And now, I have said this in my last videos. This will not move. This nut doesn't move, as you can see. All right, so when you put it back together again, you just want to hold that there while you're screwing this in. And it's a little tricky for me to, but when you just pull it out and it's not moving at all, this one comes right off. But it does not screw on, so you just have to push it against here and screw this in, and that'll get you set up. And once you get it going, it holds itself there, which is actually very nice. All right, so the backside one's a little more tricky to get to, and I kind of just put my driver in the backside of it and feel for the Phillips head part, and I get my head around there sometimes if I can't see it, and line them up and start. Now this one will spin, so I have to hold this one. And then once it's almost out, spin it off the rest of the way by hand. Try not to lose it. It'll drop down. Now we have to get this out. Now there's a little Z bend in this arm. Okay, that's the governor linkage right here. You're gonna pull this out. You can pull that bolt out all the way in the back side here. And then you'll have this free. All right, and then the Z bend, you just go down a little bit, pull down a little bit, turn to the side, and it'll come right out. All right, you can look at this, and it's a Z bend. Okay, so just remember, when you're putting it back in, make sure you get the right hole. You're gonna go back in, just like we did. In, up, and then you're together. Put your bolt back in there, and boom, you're good. Oops. All right, so that's pretty much how you get a carburetor off of this Tecumseh engine. This is 9 horse. Thank you for watching, and give me the thumbs up if you liked the video, and please subscribe.